Molly here. Today we are fortunate to be discussing the last episode of Strange New Worlds, Season 3. And by fortunate, I mean that I'm glad this will be the last episode until whenever they release Season 4, which probably won't be for a while. As usual, there will be bookmarks, so if you want to skip the recap, you can, and go straight to the review. However, I always recommend listening to the recap, because sometimes I stick funny stuff in there. So, anyway, here comes the recap. Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 3, Episode 10, New Life and New Civilizations. The episode opens with a going-away party for Captain Batel, who is heading back to Earth to start her new job. Pike is cooking. They make Scotty show up in formal attire, like what happened to Uhura back at the beginning of the series. Spock says they're going to run shipwide diagnostics, and Pelia says she once spent time with a time-traveling doctor. The conversation turns to Roger Corby, and Batel is disturbed when Spock says Roger has traveled to Kalikachna, a word the Vesda said to Batel that is almost phonetically identical to a city on Skygowan. Overall, this episode was incredibly boring, so I'm going to speed up the story just a bit. Roger gets into a temple on Kalikachna. Inside, he's confronted by Nurse Gamble, but now he's wearing some big headdress. Meanwhile, back on the Enterprise, they realize Gamble's transport pattern somehow rebuilt itself. It escaped and used ley lines to get to Kalikachna, so they travel there when they can't get in touch with Roger. Batel feels that she has to go on this mission. There's a lot of talk of Destiny and Batel and Pike's futures. So Una, M'Benga, Nurse Chapel, La'an, and Uhura go to find Roger. He tells them Nurse Gamble is now being treated like a god. And we get this scene where crazed followers stab themselves in the eye because we didn't already get more eye mutilation than I've ever wanted to see. Roger shows the Enterprise group a gateway stela that has writing all over it, and tells them he thinks more of the orbs they need to trap Nurse Gamble are through the gateway. M'Benga reads the stela, which is partially in Swahili, and realizes it's about him for some reason. Alright, it's Destiny. So the stela activates, scans M'Benga, and opens up. Nurse Gamble then runs into the scene and pushes M'Benga through the door, and it closes behind the two of them. M'Benga and Nurse Gamble are back inside the Temple of Doom, and Nurse Gamble tells M'Benga it's about duality. The Beholders constructed this portal so that it could not be traversed alone. Two must pass through. The plan is for Nurse Gamble to release the entities imprisoned in the temple, and they will go to Skygowan and take over people's bodies. Nurse Gamble then says that the Warden has stood over them for eternity, and killing it will allow them to escape. He shoots it with energy from his hands, and we see Captain Batel on the Enterprise suffer the effects. Her eyes then glow, as if she's Lita Alexander on Babylon 5. Nurse Chapel looks at Batel's eyes and says, "I think I've seen this before." And I said to the television, "I know I have." Chapel realizes the bioscan of the Beholder statue in the temple is a match for Batel's life signs. She is the statue. Then we have to suffer through a speech from Batel about her taking on characteristics of races that have faced evil due to epigenetic changes to her body, and she now possesses genetic memory of this evil they're facing. So she knows how to fight Nurse Gamble and the Vesda. She thinks she's transforming into the Warden. Already too long, story short. They need lots of energy to open the portal, so they decide to cross the streams of the phasers of two starships, which requires Spock and James Kirk to mind meld because even 1 second of deviation would spell disaster, and the computer wouldn't be good enough, so we get to witness Spock and Kirk acting as one. It works and opens the portal. Pike and Batel go through. Batel fights Nurse Gamble, and she gives Pike a vision of an entire lifetime lived together. Gamble destroys the statue, but Batel defeats him, and she then becomes the statue, and Pike is left standing there alone. No idea how he got back to the Enterprise, but somehow he did. Corby is going to stay behind and study stuff. Spock and Newkirk are now soulmates. And then we get a montage and whiny music playing while Una sits with Pike having a drink in his quarters. Then we get a voiceover from Pike while Pelia shows up Scotty yet again. And Chapel and Mabanga hug. Una, Ortegas, and Uhura laugh together in Not 10 Forward. Spock and La'an meditate together, and Pike says, "Maybe memory is as real as the present, and no one we have ever loved is truly gone." It ends with a bridge scene, and we learn Corby's research has provided information on a large number of uncharted planets. Enough for a 5-year mission. Una asks Pike if this is a hit-it situation. He says it's a new future and whatever kind of adventure they want it to be. And Pike tells Erica to take them out as fast as she wants to go. And she replies, "Okay, you asked for it." The end. The scene where Batel and Pike were living a lifetime together took, I would say, maybe a third of this episode. And what was the purpose of that other than to show that she gave him that gift of remembering something they'd never be able to have together? Like, I don't even understand why they did that. It was a waste of time. It was a waste of time, and it really rubbed me the wrong way. It just felt like filler. This whole episode was boring. Incredibly boring. There seemed to be no energy to any of the scenes in this whole episode. I don't even know what this was. It kind of felt like it was supposed to be the series finale, especially that line about enough uncharted planets to fill a 5-year mission. It felt like it was being a setup for their new Year 1 series, especially when they had Spock and Newkirk mind meld. Then, that scene where they were talking to each other at the end, Kirk had just beat Spock at chess. It kind of felt like, I don't know, are they saying that he can now beat Spock at chess because the mind meld? Had they played chess before? I don't even remember. It took something away from their relationship when it was artificially made close due to the mind meld, which also made no sense as to why they needed to do that. This whole episode was just junk. There was a lot of stuff that was taken from other series. However, a lot of that stuff was based on common tropes. But it felt like it was actually taken from other series rather than the trope itself. Because the spin that other series had put on this stuff was the same as what we got in this. So there was no new idea added to this. There was nothing to really make it their own. This was just boring. It was boring. I mean, there were a lot of other series that I saw in this. Babylon 5 was probably the one that I thought this was closest to as far as where they got the idea from. The made-for-TV movie Thirdspace was basically they find this artifact and... Spoilers here, everybody, sorry. But they find this artifact that was left by the Vorlon. So the beholders in this were like the Vorlon in Babylon 5, this ancient race that built these gates. These memories that had been planted in her by the Vorlon in case this artifact was ever found. That was so much like what they did with Batel in this, except for her it was genetic memory. But this just was so... Can't they think up anything original? Like anything. Just try. Just once. Just something. At this point, I don't even care if it's bad. I just want it to be original.
I can tell you why they had that, what'd you say, about a third of the episode, a quarter of the episode with Batel and Pike growing old together?
I think it was about a third.
I can tell you why they did that. When you ask most people what their favorite TNG episode is, The Inner Light is usually at the top of the list. Best of Both Worlds is probably second or third, depending on who you're asking. That's why they did that. This was a combination of the Inner Light from TNG, Babylon 5 Thirdspace, and the ending of Deep Space Nine, with a little bit of Fifth Element thrown in there. I also saw a little bit of the TOS episode, The Lights of Zatar, when it came to the brainwaves and her taking on the brainwaves, well, taking on something that was aligning with the entity. This was a mashup again. And I second what you're saying, because we've gotten pushback in our comments trying to educate us that nothing is original and everything is borrowed. And let's just say that's true. I don't agree that everything is borrowed, although I do think people learn by looking at older stuff. But let's just say that's true. All I'm asking for is when you borrow from something, when you're inspired by something, to transform it in a way where you're not just duplicating what you're stealing from. Transform it somehow. And that's been our argument, is the problem we're having isn't always that they're borrowing, although I would argue they should try to do a little bit of originality. I think that 4.5 Vulcans was their attempt at original writing, and it was garbage. So they have to fall back on using what we think is AI, and I'm going to touch on that in a minute too, the whole AI discussion. But that's what this is, and it was boring. I agree with you. There was like no energy at all in this episode. Everybody was sleepwalking through their lines. The closest that I think I got to any sort of energy was when Pike was getting ready in that Inner Light place. He was going to go off to that training, and he knew he was going to end up in the wheelchair after that. And he was kind of scared to do that, but also knew that it was his destiny to do that. That was the closest I got to feeling anything at all, like anything. And I'm not even saying that was great, just a little bit. And as far as the AI goes, I guess I want to clarify our position, because we were getting some comments last week. We are not claiming that they are using ChatGPT specifically for writing stories. Because 2 years ago, we made a video where we did use ChatGPT, and it came up with, I think it was 3 or 4 pretty decent stories, actually. So the argument's floating around, well, they can't be using AI because these stories from AI make more sense. And I agree, they do. But what we're saying is we think they have an internal system that's not ChatGPT. It's specifically designed for writers writing stuff, and it's trained on material from older stuff. And the criteria almost certainly in these queries, if you're going to use ChatGPT to simulate what they're probably doing, you can't just say, write me a Star Trek story, because the AI will write you a Star Trek-like story that actually is decent and is missing the belittling and is missing the derivation from direct Star Trek episodes. You have to put in there, if you're going to simulate it, please give me a Star Trek story that belittles Kirk, makes Spock do this. I think they have a set of criteria with the legacy characters that they must have in the story. And then also, make sure this references as much older material as you possibly can from Star Trek. And then it goes ahead and mines stuff from other stuff too, because it's trying to tie it together. And so that's why I think that the experiment we did 2 years ago wasn't to prove that the stories were on par with what the writers are doing. What we were trying to show, because back then people were questioning, well, AI's not there yet. AI can't write stories. And we were trying to show 2 years ago that yes, AI can write stories, and they can write a decent outline to get you going on a story. You can't just say because these stories make more sense with AI, that proves that they're not using it. It didn't belittle Spock and Kirk. Well, you didn't ask it to belittle Spock and Kirk.
Yeah, when you're doing research, you may have a number of specific databases that you can draw from. It's kind of like doing genealogy research. You're going to have all these old census to look at, as well as birth records and marriage records and even like military pensions and things like that. So you really have to know specifically what search criteria you need to use in order to find the specific thing that you're looking for. And so when you use something like a Chat GPT, it's going to draw from all sorts of different places, not just what you're looking for. So I'm certain that they're not using something like Chat GPT. I'm sure they are using a specific database that has been very well trained with curated information as to what they want to draw from. So they're going to be very specific with their search terms in order to get back what they want. And without having access to the databases that they are specifically using, it's impossible for us to be able to duplicate the results that they get. So just the fact that you can get a decent story out of ChatGPT, well, that doesn't say that they're not using AI. All it says is that you're drawing from a very different database and you're using very different search terms than what they are. Because I have a feeling what's happening is that they are using a database or multiple databases that is giving specific elements to use as an outline. And then they are actually writing that outline into a script using the different elements that their AI has given them. I think that's what they're doing, because that would be how you would achieve this result. You can't just type into ChatGPT, give me a Star Trek story. Otherwise, you get what we got 2 years ago in our stories that we did for our video. And also, I know UK Danger Man did one recently as well. And that's why those stories are so much better, because they're given a wider range to draw from. It's not being specific. It's not told exactly, write a story that puts Batel at the forefront and minimizes Captain Pike, et cetera, et cetera. It's things like that. These are search terms that you would use. Also, like I said, if you're in a library and you're using a reference librarian to help you, which obviously is a very dated thing to do, but just bear with me, you have to be specific with your search terms to get the results that you want or need. I have a feeling they're very good at doing that. So yes, I do believe they're using AI to mine a database or databases that are proprietary to them. And they're not using ChatGPT, I'll tell you that much.
Going back to what they did use here, the inner light, I don't think I have to explain anymore to the audience that's listening to me what that means. And we know why I'm saying this is referencing the inner light. Babylon 5 Thirdspace, as I was watching this, I kept pausing it and telling Molly, this is giving me deja vu to Babylon 5 Thirdspace. Not the entire story. The entire story wasn't exactly the same. But some of the visuals, the genetic memory that was placed inside of Batel, Lita had that, it was something similar that the Vorlons put inside of her, having the glowing eyes.
It was telepathic memory that they had given her.
Having the glowing eyes that was happening with her. The artifact that they were scrambling to try to figure out the language and what it meant and what it was referring to. And I could go on about other little aspects of that made-for-TV film that maps to this stuff. And they've taken from Babylon 5 before. In fact, we had a whole video about in Discovery, that library episode, where it was blocked, even the scenes were blocked out the same as Babylon 5. And then you go to Deep Space Nine and you go to the ending there, and it maps in a lot of ways to what happened at the ending here with what happened to Cisco compared to what happened to Batel. I have a purpose, a destiny I have to fulfill. That part was in there and not just a general trope. It felt like it was lifted from Deep Space Nine. Then you throw in a little bit of this, a little bit of that, mix it together. At the end of the day, the real problem was this episode was boring. It was 55 minutes long and it was boring. That sappy music at the end when they were trying to go through and say some dime store philosophy things that I just rolled my eyes. It's like somebody who heard an intelligent person say something and so they memorized it but got the words all mixed up. When Batel was laying on her deathbed in that inner light thing, and she was trying to spew out this life philosophy to Pike, and it just, I cringed at it. This is like a 6th grader spitting out some attempt at life wisdom, and I just shook my head, shrugged my shoulders, and said, whatever.
Yeah, because the whole thing here with the opening of the portal and these ancient entities trying to get out, it was very Lovecraftian. As far as, opening a portal and an ancient evil entity is trying to get through. We've seen this done before. And that's the thing, like, if you're going to redo something, do it better, put a different spin on it, and they didn't do that. I would argue that the best spin on that I've seen was probably in the Doctor Who revival. I think it was probably a 2005 episode with Christopher Eccleston and Rose Tyler. They were actually in an episode with Charles Dickens, and they were fighting these gas creatures that were trying to come through from a different dimension. The Unquiet Dead. The sacrifice made by the girl in that episode, I guess young woman, Gwyneth, it was so much more profound than what this was. You actually felt bad for her that she was dying, but she was okay with it because she was saving the world. And then at the end, Rose is like, a servant girl saved the world and nobody's ever going to know. That was far more interesting than this.
Yeah, Babylon 5 Thirdspace was more interesting than this.
Yes.
And that's not even one of my favorite Babylon 5 made-for-TV films. Because In the Beginning, I think, is my favorite, but Thirdspace was okay. And they borrowed from an okay Babylon 5 made-for-TV movie. And then Deep Space Nine. Again, everybody who's watching this who's over the age of, pick the age that you could, 35, 40, whether it's in repeats or first run. I know our viewer audience that's listening to my voice. They all know Deep Space Nine. They know where that was taken from, the ending of it. Not the war stuff that was happening with the founders and that, but the ending stuff with the Pa Wraith and what happened to Cisco. Yeah. Emissary Destiny, I guess, finally happening. Yeah, we all know this. That's why I don't understand why they keep doing this. Why they keep stealing from other properties. And there are so many people out there that defend this saying, well, like for instance, last week, when you had the aliens on the planet working together, and you could say it was borrowed from Enemy Mine, you could say it was borrowed from Galactica 1980, you could say it was borrowed from UFO from the early 1970s, and they all derive probably from a property in the 60s. The difference is every one of those iterations was transformed in some way. It was its own unique thing. Sure, you could say it goes back to that, but it was transformed in some way. What they do on this show is they don't really transform it. They just lift it out of a derived piece anyway, and then they jam the corners under the cracks so that it fits. And that's how they take the trope and they put it into their property. And that's what rubs Molly and I the wrong way. It's not that they're using something that people have done before. It's how they're doing it. It's not the what, it's the how. And that's the part that bothers me. And then I saw Davey Perez's name on this episode, and he's one of my favorite Strange New Worlds writers, and there's a huge amount of sarcasm there. And so when I saw his name, he was one of the two names, I knew this was going to be a real interesting episode.
I thought this series was supposed to be led by Captain Pike. That's what we were all supposed to believe.
I think Anson Mount's the first name when the opening credits happen, and it's starring, and I think Anson Mount is the first character.
So why is it this whole season he's felt like a supporting character as opposed to the lead? I think the zombie episode was the one where we saw him the most in the most leading role. But even then, he still felt like he was in support of M'Benga. It feels like he's never actually in the lead role. He's never the star.
They were tricking everybody to think, hey, he was like one of the few palatable pieces of Discovery. We're going to make a show centered around him. People will want to watch that. And in the first season, I wouldn't say that they did a great job centering on him, but they did a better job than they're doing now. And yes, I know he had a child. I know he was on paternity leave. But that's not what I'm questioning, because when he is in the episode, he is almost a non-entity. He doesn't really matter.
He always takes the back seat to somebody else. In this episode, obviously, the back seat was to Batel.
And a little bit of M'Benga, too.
Yeah, and M'Benga. I just...
And this episode was about Batel's destiny. It was so irritating in that inner light when there was a little bit of time spent on his destiny as far as being in that wheelchair. And he was worried about it. And I'm like, okay, I think they're finally going to bring this all together. And then they didn't. Because at the end of the day, this was all about Batel and her destiny. Like when she was at that punching bag at the beginning of the episode and she's like, I have to come with you because I feel I have to be there.
And you know, I'm just going to say this. I know she's a better actress than what we've gotten out of her with this series. Because I've seen her on Letterkenny as Mrs. McMurray. That tells me that it has to be the direction and the script with this as to why we're not getting a very good performance.
She played a weird character in Letterkenny, but she played weird really well.
Oh, yeah. So that tells me I think she can actually act. But again, this comes right back to writing and direction. This show was boring.
And I agree with you. This felt like a finale. It felt like they were, in their own way, in their own incompetent way, that they were trying to sew everything up. They had their nice little touchy-feeling music playing at the end, and it made a logical end to the series. And I don't know why they're going to continue this. What other stories are they going to tell? I guess they're going to say, well, Pike still hasn't gotten into his wheelchair. I don't care at this point. So many things don't line up, and she was even mentioning in that inner light about things don't have to work out a certain way, and I don't know. Like, I don't even want to try to defend what was said in the inner light because it was trying to be profound without being profound. It was a waste of time. I was getting angry as I was watching it. Not that what they were doing was like offensive. It just was like, it was boring. Move on. This is boring.
Well, and somebody kept knocking on the door throughout, and it's like, well, I've seen that before too.
Yeah, it reminded me of that Doctor Who episode with Matt Smith, Hyde, where he kept hearing that knocking on the door, and then eventually you found out what that knocking was about.
Oh, and don't forget with David Tennant, he kept hearing the knocking, and that was an indication that his end of life was rapidly approaching.
That was probably the more famous of the two instances we mentioned.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not saying, oh, geez, that was original. I'm sure you could look back and find out where it was derived from even further back. This isn't a contest about who can find the earliest incarnation of an idea. This isn't about, well, let's find who did it first. And whoever did it first gets ultimate credit and everybody else are copycats. What I'm saying is, who derived it that this is borrowed from? It doesn't seem to me like they borrow from the original. They don't derive from the original and put their own spin. What they do is they derive, if you're lucky, from already a derived thing. So in the end, you don't get much of a change from the derivation to begin with.
To me, it feels like a photocopy of a photocopy.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. There's degradation that happens because you're not coming from the original. It's like when you copy VHS tapes. Boy, does the quality go down fast when you're doing that.
And that's the complaint here. But it doesn't matter. I've been educated over this past few seasons of reviewing things. There's a large group of people that just do not care. There was somebody in the comments last week that was getting all upset, saying, well, that's real presumptuous of you to say I'm a person who likes stolen stuff. And I pointed out to this person, well, we've presented our case that this is stolen. You told me you like it. You accept it as it is. Therefore, you make the conclusion. You don't need me to tell you what that means.
Because the answer is yes. Yes, you are.
And you just can't accept that. And apparently that's a big group of people out there. They do not care. And another one of these arguments is, well, you're not being fair. The younger generation, they've never seen this stuff before. So yeah, you're old enough to have seen where it came from, but these younger people have never seen it before. And I'm fine repackaging an idea, but if you don't transform it enough, you put in the credits where you got it from. That's all I'm asking, is if you're going to take something, almost lift it entirely out of something, then in the credits you put based on a short story or based on an episode of, and you put it in there. And then the people who say, well, they can't do that because they'll have to pay royalties out. Tough. Then you pay the royalties if that's got to be in your script. So that the young people know, yes, you're being introduced to this idea, but we were too incompetent to transform it correctly, so we have to give credit, which you should be doing, by the way. When you go off to college, you better not do as we do. You better give proper citation to where you're borrowing stuff from.
I would also argue that younger people today have it way easier than we did when it comes to going back and watching older material. It was the very late 80s when my family got their first VCR. You know, we didn't have cable either, so I got stuck watching whatever was on broadcast television, or I watched nothing at all. People now, my God, you've got everything basically right there at your fingertips, in your pocket, because you can watch it on your phone.
But I don't think they'll go back and watch it.
That's on them.
If it's in the 4:3 ratio, they won't watch it.
Again, that's on them.
Which I don't understand, because when I grew up, black and white was not a thing. When I was a kid, color was established in the 70s. Well, color was established in the 60s on TV, but I mean, in the 70s where I imprinted on television. But I went back all the time and watched black and white movies and TV when I was a kid. So that's my version of going 4:3 ratio. But these kids will not go back and watch 4:3 ratio TV. They will not watch stuff that maybe has some iffy modeling out there, or like in the case of Babylon 5, some early CGI. They apparently think there's no value in looking back at that stuff. And I don't get that, because I went back as a kid. I'm old, but not super old, in the sense that I watched the Three Stooges and the Little Rascals, and there's no way I'm old enough to have watched those first run when they played. Same with like the Flash Gordon serials. I'm not that old. I have to rely on repeats to watch those.
And I will also say it's on parents and grandparents to show younger people some of this stuff. Because obviously this was after we got our VCR, but my dad would bring home videotapes of things like Metropolis, you know, the silent film. And he would bring home all sorts of different science fiction written by Harlan Ellison. And maybe some of that stuff probably wasn't the best to be showing to little children. But I was exposed to things written by Harlan Ellison. And it's because my dad brought that stuff home. So if you spend time with younger people, introduce them to older stuff that is culturally important. Make sure that they're familiar with these things. Because even though something might be silent or in black and white or in 4:3, heaven forbid, there's stuff to be gotten from watching that. Again, it's this shared cultural heritage that I think is being lost because younger generations aren't watching the same things that the older generations did. And it's largely, I would say, due to streaming services, because they're given leeway to just pick and choose what they want to watch, instead of being forced to sit down in front of that family television and share an experience with a multi-generational group. And I think that is damaging our culture, because we're not having the same cultural touchstones that we did when we were sitting there as a group watching these things. And then, better still, you know what? Watch it with them and then discuss it with them afterward. So if you're a grandparent or a parent, spend time with these young people, take that pad out of their hands, and actually force them to interact and develop those soft skills. Because, my God, society's heading in a bad way if we don't start doing that.
Going back to a few minutes ago, somebody was trying to explain, that's presumptuous of you to say I like stolen material. No, it's not presumptuous of me. I'm just telling you the A to B to C. You put the pieces together on what that means. And if you don't like the answer, maybe change what you're doing. Maybe start thinking, well, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't be liking this like I am. Does anybody ever think, is it all about emotions? Do you ever bother to think, why do I like this show? Because I can sit and talk to Molly about why I like the original Star Trek. And I can go through all the reasons why I like the original Star Trek. It's not just, well, I can't explain it to you. It's just a feeling inside of me. Because it seems like that's all, it's just about feelings and that's it. If you got a feeling, I like something because that's a feeling. But why? Why do you like it? What exactly about the series do you like? I can't explain it. I just like the feeling of it. If that's the answer, then there's really nothing to have a discussion with because I'm not you. I can't have your feelings.
Yeah. If you can't understand why people might want to have a more intellectual discussion about this stuff that goes outside the realm of feelings, maybe you should, I don't know, close your mouth and listen for a little while. Maybe see if you could pull yourself up to a higher level of thought. Elevate yourself above basic feelings.
Well, that's something I would expect from somebody emotionally stunted. A child works on feelings, emotions. And then later on through their teen years and into their 20s, at least it used to be, that's where you gained the ability to make decisions based on
reason.
Yeah. They give no reasoning. They assert stuff like, this was some of the best Star Trek ever made. And then they'll go ahead and say, well, if they give any reasons, it's usually reasons like, I really liked how Pike's character, I don't know, was in the kitchen all the time. I mean, I don't know. They'll give some really bizarre answers. Or if they explore, oh, this idea was interestingly explored. Like, was it? Because I don't think it was explored at all very interestingly. The thing they stole it from was explored interestingly, but you didn't mention that at all. I don't know. Maybe that's just part of getting older. There's no discussion. There's no debate to be had. It's just, you hurt my feelings and now I'm going to type away at you and I'm going to call you a bunch of names.
But again, this comes back to how some people, if you criticize something that they like, it's like you're criticizing them personally because somehow their identity is wrapped up in that thing, which is really weird to me.
Well, it's really weird that they do that. And then when people like us said we spent decades, multiple decades watching Star Trek, and they say, well, don't watch this anymore, it's not for you. So now you're coming at me, something that was entwined in my identity over decades, and now you're telling me that my identity doesn't matter? Really? I don't know. I guess to bring this back to this episode was just boring. It was too long. For what they were trying to do, 55 minutes was way too long. This should have been like a 40-minute episode.
Well, they wanted that inner light thing thrown in there.
Which was worthless.
Yeah. Well, that's why I didn't even talk about it. I just said it was there because nothing was accomplished with it. You didn't learn anything from it. I didn't feel anything while watching it because it was very obvious where things were going. So it meant really nothing. It was just filler.
And then you mentioned somehow they're trying to set up the reason that Kirk can beat Spock in chess and TOS is not that he is a out-of-the-box thinker. It's that him and Spock had a mind meld. I guess you mentioned that in your recap, and that's how I was thinking too, that they were trying to set up the reason they're friends is because of the mind meld in TOS.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what they were setting up there, because I don't remember seeing him ever playing chess with Spock. Kirk was desperately trying to beat his Vulcan captain at chess, because that was something that came up in that disaster episode with Castle Grayskull.
What I'm saying here, though, is the reason they're playing chess to begin with is because in TOS, there was that one scene where Kirk beat Spock at chess. And Spock said something like, well, you have an interesting way to play, but the game is yours. And so for decades, we all knew that Kirk could beat Spock because he was unorthodox. It's not that he played a better chess game tactic for tactic. It's that he would think outside the box. It was basically adding to the Kirk character on how unpredictable he could be on things and how he wasn't going to give up in a situation.
And I think that's just one of the things that they wrote down on their little checklist as to what they know about Captain Kirk. Because in that hot dog episode, when he and La'an were in that alternate past in Toronto, he was hustling people at chess for money. So, again, like I said, I think for some of these characters, they have checklists as to what their characteristics are. And so they go through that checklist and they use those elements to write the character, even though they don't seem to have a real feel for who the character is. They just know you got to check this box. He plays chess. Yep, there we go. He beat Spock at chess. Yep, there we go. There doesn't seem to be any depth to what they write. It's all very superficial.
But it was insulting in this episode because after the mind meld, when Ace Ventura and Spock were in Not 10 Forward, and they were saying something like, I can see us being friends for a long time to come. Where in TOS, they became friends over the course of those 3 seasons. And now, it's like, no, they're friends because they shared a mind meld. You know how when Picard and Sarek had that mind meld and they shared each other's lives? That's what they're essentially setting up here, so that Kirk and Spock are friends just because of this mind meld.
And that bothers me tremendously because in TOS, it was never established that Spock mind melded with Kirk before we even saw them on the show.
Any other human, I do believe in the episode where he first did it, it was stated about, I've never done this before, it's dangerous to do on a human or something. It was something like that. So mind melding on human beings shouldn't even be a thing for Spock at the very minimum, but now apparently he does it all the time.
It really takes away something from their relationship on TOS when you try to set this up as a prequel. Their closeness is due to this mind meld, due to, let's face it, Roger Corby and his stupid dig and Nurse Chapel. Just the way that they have taken these legacy characters and basically just destroyed the timeline. I don't even know what to say. I don't know how people could accept this other than, yes, it's an alternate timeline. And again, if they had just been up front when they first started this series, actually when they first started with Discovery, that this was an alternate universe, alternate timeline, whatever. Preferably alternate universe, actually. If they had just said this was an alternate universe, I wouldn't have been nearly as hard on it. Because I wouldn't have cared as much. Because that multiverse stuff, I'm not into multiverse stuff. So if it's a multiverse thing that's not original timeline, I'm not interested.
And that's why they didn't do it.
Yeah, I know.
Because they know the exact same thing would happen to multiple people out there. It's, oh, this is Kurt's verse. I'm not going to watch this. It's not real Star Trek.
No, instead, they basically manufactured enemies that they didn't have to.
Because after the first season of Discovery, actually the first episode of Discovery, it was clear to me that this wasn't in the same continuity. It just wasn't. The values were different. The events are different. The whole feeling is off for the series. And they just kept selling it and selling it and selling it as this is original continuity. And it's not. This is Kurt's verse stuff. And hey, if people want to watch this crap, go for it. Like, have no power to stop you from watching this crap. But I'm also going to say that I find Kurt's verse to be crap. And I find it to be lowbrow. I find it to be lacking any sort of intellectual stimulation at all. And you read into it what I just asserted, and if you accept it as it is, then you read into whatever you think I might be saying about you, somebody who accepts it as it is. I'm not sure there's much more to say about this episode, and maybe we can talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing post Strange New Worlds.
Well, post season 3 here.
Right. We are still working on our own original scripted animation, and Molly almost has the first episode script completed. We have a little bit more to do in it, and then we can start blocking out the scenes and then starting to get it going. And we'll be sharing with you guys maybe sometime this year, what we're going to be doing here, we want to make sure we're comfortable with how it's turning out before we put any product out there, even just stills for you to look at.
Yep, because I still need to purchase some upgraded software to do some more work on the characters, which shouldn't be a problem. That won't be a problem. Yeah, this is something we've never actually done before, so I have no idea how long it's actually going to take to go from script to blocked out scenes to actual finished product, because there's so much that goes into this. You got to record the voices, which, again, something we haven't done before. Incidental music, all sorts of things like that you don't usually think of, but...
Two-person crew, too.
Yes, two people doing this, trying to do it for the very first time, so I have no idea how long this first time is going to take. But, the good news is, after we do it once, we'll have some experience, and it'll go faster the next time.
Yeah, and to let everybody know, the animation, this is a science fiction series that we're writing. That's why we're sharing it on this channel.
Yes, and we will be doing it in 3D animation.
But we're gearing it more toward, content-wise, something you would expect from like what old Star Trek used to aim for, which was like, I always thought like late high school, going into college. That's the age group we're shooting for. Yeah,
because we want this to be more like the old family shows that we used to get, where families could sit and watch an adventure together. And yeah, so there's not going to be any kind of gross eyeball mutilation, no sexy stuff. It's
Yeah, when I said high school or college, I meant as far as intellectual stimulation, not, hey, let's stick half-nude characters out there gouging each other's eyeballs out. Like, we're not doing that at all. We are making family entertainment, but somebody who's in college still should be able to get intellectual stimulation from what we're doing.
Yeah, this is going to be kind of like anti-Kurtzman Trek, because it's not going to be based on a soap opera. There's going to be, there will be interpersonal relationships. That's how humans work. But it's going to be based around the story, the mystery, the science fiction, as opposed to what we get with, say, Strange New Worlds, where it revolves around the relationships. So we're not doing that.
So I would expect at least to hear the premise of what we're doing. We probably can share that sometime later this year, just the premise. We might have some stills that we could share on the screen as far as slides, as far as early concepts of what we're doing. But we just thought we'd let you know that's why we may not be cranking out stuff every single week, because we're working on that. But we also do retro reviews of television programs. We've already done stuff like Briscoe County Jr., Earth Final Conflict, Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda. So we do go back and review like we do with these new Star Trek series. We review older series that we enjoy. So you'll also be getting that as well. We have a few series that we would like to do on our radar. We just have to decide which ones we want to do first.
Yeah, we're almost finished watching Dark Angel. So we're almost finished with that series, so we'll be able to do a video on that, hopefully within the next few months. And what else have we been working on? Oh, Sequest and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Yep.
Yes. We've watched Sequest all the way through. We just have to work on Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea now. So that's something else that we're working on. If you're interested at all in more fantasy, Forever Night is something we're going to be talking about, syndicated series from the 1990s.
We might get to Max Headroom. I don't know if we have time for that yet, but we were talking about doing Max Headroom.
Yep, so that's another possibility that we'll be talking about. We've been working our way through The Bionic Woman from the 1970s. I don't know how much further we have to go with.
I think we have 1 or 2 more seasons.
So we're about halfway through the Bionic Woman series. So we're still working away on that. So these are things that are coming up. We've been watching a lot of varied stuff, and hopefully some of that stuff interests you. We'll be getting those out periodically throughout the rest of the year, while we're working on our new original animated series.
And I'm trying to remember the new Doctor Who, I think that's a mini-series. Is that supposed to be, I think, early next year? The Sea Devils, I think it was a Sea Devils, or...
I think that might be later this year. So when that comes out, we will definitely be doing a video about that as well.
And unfortunately, I believe early next year is that Starfleet Academy, and we'll be here for that, even though it's probably not going to be very good.
Yeah. So we've got stuff coming up, even though Strange New Worlds is now I guess, I don't even know what to call this, summer break for them. I don't know, because who knows when the next one's going to be.
They have to film a bunch of puppets, see, so they got to get all their puppets together so they can do a puppet episode in season 4. So
I forgot about that.
It's going to take a lot of people sticking their hands up puppets' butts, which is about the level of writing that they do too, so at least it will match that.
Alrighty then. Oh, God. So the next Star Trek we're going to do is probably going to be that lovely Starfleet Academy next year. So, I guess, until then.
Take care.